Hi all, this is my round 2 game at the Southend Open against Salimbeni, who's a very promising junior, ECF around 150. I played c4 and he played knight f6, and then I played knight c3, and now he played a very quick d5. I took on d5, he recaptured with the knight, and now I played g3 to try and exert more pressure on the d5 square. He played g6, I fianchettoed the bishop on g2, and now instead of knight takes c3, he played an alternative knight b6. And here I had a long thought about this, and I thought maybe d3 is a good setup. I didn't really fancy d4 and e3 because I didn't want to give black a biting point on d4 if I set up the pawns like that. So d3 also had this idea that after bishop g7, I don't want to castle immediately on the king side, but instead maybe consider castling queen side and a sort of hack attack setup, trying to exchange off his dark squared bishop. So bishop e3, and after castles now I played queen d2. One of the justifications for this is this knight has travelled away from the king's side, so I think black's king is weaker than usual. After knight 8d7, I now played bishop h6. In the Grandmaster section, by the way, in round 1, Hebden had beaten Howell with a similar basic attacking scheme of this bishop h6, which I'm hoping to get the PGN game score and video annotate on YouTube. That was Howell's only loss in the Grandmaster section, which was called the Jack Spiegel Memorial. Anyway, he played e5, and now I played h4, because he can't easily answer with h5. And, you know, this might also have some positional implications if the attack doesn't even come off, which it did in the game. After knight f6, I just played now h5. One of the points about this is that if he does knight takes h5, I have bishop f3, and I thought this would be very dangerous. For example, knight f6, and maybe just now taking on g7, followed by queen h6, and now knight e4 could be good. Although Rybka is not impressed so far, knight bd5, knight g5, and now it is impressed, with white having a massive advantage. Let's see, rook e8, bishop takes d5, queen takes, it's got knight takes h7 now, knight takes, queen takes, king f8, knight f3, advantage to white. Okay, it's not exactly what I thought, but it's still an advantage to white, this idea. So h5 is sound after all. Queen e7 was played, and after bishop takes, king takes, I now opened the h file. Queen h6 check, and now this pin, that was the idea of this queen h6, to get this other pin against the queen. So my queen's in an attacking square. So he played queen g7, and I just played knight f3, because I've got a nice strategic card to play here. This e5 pawn can be blockaded with knight g5 to e4. I quite like my knights and the white square control in this position. So after rook f7, I played knight g5. Rook e7, I castled queenside now. So I think I've got a nice attacking position here and good control of the light squares. He played c6, and sometimes it's a bit ominous when players play this with knight on b6. They're trying to repair their pawn structure with knight d5. I think it's a very bad mistake to ever play knight takes d5 and allow them to heal their pawn structure with a potential space advantage later with either e4 or d4. So that's something to be avoided, I think. So I tried to exert more pressure on the dark squares. I played d4. I was also considering for a long time e4, but I didn't want to give away my pivot square on e4 for the knights. So all in all, I thought even though d4 was slightly risky for this diagonal, it was the best way to increase the pressure in this position. He played now bishop f5, and all of a sudden, with the absence of that e5 pawn, these two pawns are now mobile. I start moving them forward now. e4, he can't take on e4 because of knight takes, and then I'm hitting the rook on e7, so he can't have that discovered attack on the rook. c5, rook d6, so in some variations I might be threatening rook f6. Played bishop d7 now, and here I played actually f4. I wanted to get e5 in So you see that once that e5 pawn had gone, these pawns have been liberated with a big space advantage for white. So knight e8, rook d1, now bishop c6. So a temporary pin on the e pawn, which is annoying. But I play just rook h2. And now after rook c8, e5 finally. And all of a sudden I'm gaining more access to these dark squares, especially f6 is going to become crucial. Bishop takes g2, rook takes, and now knight c7. So now finally knight ce4. So I've got huge knights now coming on dark squares. Knight bd5. Pardon me. Now rook hd2. So I've got all the strategic trumps now. A lot of pressure on the d file. Rivka gives a plus more than 2 unit advantage here. He chases my knight on h6. I just retreat it to f3, although stronger appears to be rook h3 according to Rivka. No, it's returned to knight f3. It's just simple knight f3, simple stuff. But after rook d7, I played an inferior move, which I thought was adequate though, rook takes d5 with a knight f6 tactic, but actually knight f6 is crushing here. For example, if takes, e takes, and then that's it, because the queen and the rook is attacked. But actually I just played this tactic, rook takes d5, which is inferior, but adequate. So after rook takes knight f6, he played king h8, and I took on d5. So 2 knights for the rook. And after rook e8, I return the knight back to f6, and he's got further troubles now because his king's trapped, his queen's tied down to the h6 pawn. So after rook c8, knight f5 to g5 now. His position is actually hopeless because I'm actually threatening now. Knight f7 check, and if queen takes f7, queen takes h6, mating. So he played h5, and after g4, it's all over. I've got a winning position here. There's nothing. Queen h6, knight f7, for example. There's no defence here. I'm just peeling open the h file. So he resigned here. Let's have a quick overview and summary. So it was an English opening. Quick d5. I was trying to gain control of the light squares first of all, but now I switch to a dark square attack around his king. One of the side effects of this h-pawn attack was isolating black's e-pawn here, because he took, remember, the f-pawn, so he's got an isolated e-pawn, which is a lovely blockade square then provided on e4 for my knights. So this nice manoeuvre gives at least white a positional advantage. Now here was the controversial point in the game. Should I play e4 here with f4, or should I play some other plan? I eventually decided to increase the pressure on the dark squares, increased though potentially the risk on the diagonal. But on the other hand, I'm liberating these 2 pawns now, especially the e-pawn, because that e5 has gone, so these pawns are now free to march. So I use them to gain a big space advantage now with preparing e5, and after that the dark squares were even able to be occupied now with a mighty knight on f6. So after rook d7, there was a nice tactic, but knight f6 is stronger here, more clinically accurate, and immediately crushing. But I played rook d5, which also wins material, but is not as convincing. But here it is apparently, it became apparent that it was hopeless for black. So after g4, he resigned. I hope you enjoyed that game. Please leave any comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.